bad trips like, yeah, Nazareth. I'm fucked up, homie, you fucked up. But if God got us, then we gon' be alright.
Nigga, we gon' be alright. Nigga, we gon' be alright. We gon' be alright. Do you hear me? Do you feel me? We gon' be alright. Nigga, we gon' be alright. Huh? We gon' be alright. Nigga, we gon' be alright. Do you hear me? Do you feel me? We gon' be alright.
And when I wake up, I recognize you looking at me for the pay cut. Bahamas, I be looking at you from the face down. One Mac 11, even boom with the face down. Scheming, and let me tell you about my life. Painkillers only put me in the twilight. With pretty pussy and Benjamin is the highlight. I tell my mama I love her, but this what I like. Lord knows, 20 of them in my Chevy. Tell them all to come and get me, reaping everything I sow. So my karma come in heaven, no preliminary hearings on my record. I'm a motherfucking gangster and silence for the record. Tell the world I know it's too late. Boys and girls, I think I'm going great. Trying to side my face this all day. Won't you please believe when I say, when you know we've been hurt, been down before. Nigga, when our pride was low, looking at the world like, where do we go? Nigga, and we hate poor, when the killer's dead in the street for sure. Nigga, I'm at the preacher's door. My knees getting weak and my gun might blow, but we gon' be alright.
Nigga, we gon' be alright. Nigga, we gon' be alright. We gon' be alright. Do you hear me? Do you feel me? We gon' be alright. Nigga, we gon' be alright. Huh? We gon' be alright. Nigga, we gon' be alright. Do you hear me? Do you feel me? We gon' be alright.
What you want? You a house, you a car for the acres and a mule, a piano, a guitar, anything. See, my name is Lucy, you your dog. Motherfucker, you can live at the mall. I can see the evil, I can tell it. I know it's illegal. I don't think about it. I deposit every other zero. Thinking of my partner, put the candy, penning on a Rico, digging in my pocket, in a profit, big enough to feed you. Every day my logic, get another dollar just to keep you in the presence of your Chico. I don't talk about it, be about it. Every day I see you. If I got it, then you know you got it. Heaven, I can reach you. Pet dog, my dog, that's all. Hit back and chat, I trap the back for y'all. I rap, I'm black on track, so rest assured. My rights, my wrongs, I'm right till I'm right for God. When you know we've been hurt, been down before. Nigga, when our pride was low, looking at the world like, where do we go? Nigga, and we hate poor, when the killer's dead in the street for sure. Nigga, I'm at the preacher's door. My knees getting weak and my gun might blow, but we gon' be alright.
Nigga, we gon' be alright. Nigga, we gon' be alright. We gon' be alright. Do you hear me? Do you feel me? We gon' be alright. Nigga, we gon' be alright. Huh? We gon' be alright. Nigga, we gon' be alright. Do you hear me? Do you feel me? We gon' be alright.
I don't get close to a human and human behavior. Be ready to get confused. And me and my head, there's definitely no logic to human behavior, but yet so irresistible. And me and my fear, yeah, and there is no more uncertainty. Terribly moving. A human behavior that all of a sudden turn happy. And then my head after the old to get involved in the exchange of human emotions. It's ever so satisfying. And then my head, and there is no more uncertainty. tell you you're the king of my dreams. Please don't deceive me when I hurt you. It just ain't the way it seems. Can't you hear my love buzz? Can't you hear my love buzz? Can't you hear my love buzz? I need you like a desert needs rain. I would rather like to die. Darling, when I don't see you, so spread your wings and fly. Can't you hear my love buzz? Can't you hear my love buzz? Can't you hear my love buzz?
when snow is melting. You are here, you are mine, you are spreading.
Welcome everyone to Accented Dialogues in Diaspora presented by the Diasporic Vietnamese Artists Network. My name is Philip Nguyen and I'll be your moderator / MC for tonight. With me is the one and only DJ Puzzle. Welcome back, DJ Puzzle, and thank God that you're back.
Good to be back, Philip. Glad to see you.
It's very different to have you spinning the tunes than it is to have me trying to push through some Spotify buttons. So.
Oh man, I know you're a really good DJ at heart.
At heart, that's what counts, right? But thank you so much. And if y'all want to connect with DJ Puzzle, you can check him out on Instagram or visit the tip jar at his Venmo here on the slide. We've got an incredible show in store for y'all today for Accented. For those of y'all who this is not your first Accented, welcome back. For those of y'all whom this is your first Accented, welcome. We started this show, Accented Dialogues in Diaspora, as a response to the pandemic. I think we're now on our second year of hosting the show. We've been going since 2020. And since then, we've been able to provide an intimate space for Southeast Asian and Vietnamese cultural producers to gather in conversation about their work, stories, passions, inspirations, and what they've been up to during the pandemic. And so with that, just a quick highlight on and a shout out to all of the guests who we've had on Accented so far. We're really grateful and fortunate to have had so many guests and to have been successful in so many shows. And also just so that y'all know that your contribution to the show, your ticket to the show supports DVAN's mission to celebrate and foster diasporic Vietnamese and Southeast Asian voices, and that our complex and diverse stories must be championed and passed on to current and future generations. So thank you all so very much for your support. For today's show, all of our panelists from today have so gratefully contributed auction items for us to auction off for all of y'all. And I'm just gonna really quickly take y'all to the auction website now. It's being dropped in the chat if you want to check it out. And we know that there's some sort of technical issue going on where everyone is Frederick Tran. So for our DVAN stuff, Frederick Tran, shout outs to you. And not to worry about it too much, but if you can drop your introduction with your full name, where you're calling from, and your favorite food for that, so that we can celebrate the new year together. Really quickly, if y'all want to check out 32auctions.com, this is the site that you'll get for our show today, The Art of Healing. You can check out all of the packets of items that we have available for y'all to bid on, and hopefully to win and to get a personalized poem from Thien Le, a 1-hour consultation for professional / undergraduate or undergraduate applications, a tea and thud package, the DVAN Ox package where you can get your own, DVAN mug, or the Tiger package where you can get your DVAN mug and a tote and or a shirt that was custom designed by the one and only T. Bui. So be sure to check out 32auctions.com/DVAN-accented6 to get a hold of your bids for auction items. And with that, I also want to make the announcement that we're really grateful for today's show being sponsored by Pivot, the Progressive Vietnamese American Network. Pivot's mission is to engage and empower Vietnamese Americans for a just and diverse America. The vision of Pivot is to be a collective voice for progressive Vietnamese Americans to engage and empower Vietnamese Americans through civic engagement and leadership development, and to support policies and candidates that are aligned with its values. And with that, I want to really quickly share a link that's being dropped in the chat right now, pivotnetwork.org/THET. It'll take you to the THET landing site where you can check out all of the other virtual events that Pivot will be offering through the course of the next week. Of them, we'll be making leases or red envelopes. There will also be a Tâm Sự with Chef Thu David Phu, which I'll be part of hosting. And so if you want to come and watch me burn some baluklak with Chef Thu, Top Chef Thu, please get your tickets now. So thank you so much to Pivot for co-sponsoring this Accented show. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce the host of our show so we can get started with the conversation. He is the co-founder for the Diasporic Vietnamese Artists Network. He is also the author of the best-selling short story collection, The Refugees, the Pulitzer Prize-winning novel, The Sympathizer, and its sequel, The Committed, as well as the children's book, Chicken of His Sea, which is written with his son, Ellison. Please welcome Viet Thanh Nguyen.
Hey, thanks so much for that, Philip. And DJ Puzzle, it's so good to see you back with us. We really, really missed you. Not that Philip didn't do a great job picking music for us, but there's nothing like having DJ Puzzle back here to get us all so excited about a show whose topic is actually very, very serious, but also I think hopefully very personal for so many of us on the panel, of course, but then so many of you in the audience as well. Thanks so much for sharing your food in the chat. I'm really hungry now after seeing all the mentions of bánh tét, bánh chưng, and pho, and so on and so on, but it's really lovely to see people coming in from all over the diaspora again. I'm seeing people from Hilo, New York, San Fernando Valley, San Francisco, Clarksville, Tennessee, Seattle, Orange County, San Francisco, and Santa Clara County, and San Jose, Vancouver. We have quite a few Canadians with us tonight, including from Ontario as well, Santa Clara County, Montreal, and Minneapolis. So thanks. And if I didn't mention the place where you're from, I'm sorry. Put it in the chat so we all know where you're coming from. Chúc mừng năm mới, happy Vietnamese and Lunar New Year to all of you who celebrate. We won't be here with you when that date actually happens. I wanted to take the opportunity to wish you a happy New Year right now. Funny thing, I'm a professor. I recently discovered that at my school, the University of Southern California, you can claim the Chinese Lunar New Year as a religious holiday and take an absence from class. I didn't see a mention of the Vietnamese Lunar New Year qualifying as a religious holiday. I'm not sure why. If it has been a religious holiday, I've been missing out my entire life, but it's cool that some people are taking that opportunity to spend time with their family and their friends. And welcome to all of you Frederick Trans out there. It's been an interesting little glitch in our multiverse. But if we had to be anybody, I'm glad that we could all be Frederick, who's been doing a fantastic job for us here at DVAN and with our show Accented. So we're here to talk to you tonight about the art of healing mental health in the diasporic community. Again, a topic that is so important, so pervasive, and probably not talked about enough for all of the obvious reasons I think we know if we come from immigrant, refugee, Asian, Vietnamese, Southeast Asian communities, such a sensitive topic and such a complex one. So we are going to be talking about mental health, self-care, and wellness, especially as all these issues intersect with the pandemic, and which has aggravated all of our mental health issues and challenges. We'll be talking about how these issues arise from and intersect with intergenerational trauma, how they are affected by anti-Asian violence and racism, and how they impact bicultural and queer identities as well. We'll be talking about the expanding need for mental health awareness and dialogue, and providing some resources for older and younger generations. So we are really fortunate to have with us 4 panelists to help us think through these issues. The first of those panelists is James Huynh, who goes by he, him, his. He is a PhD student in community health sciences at the UCLA Fielding School of Public Health. James is also chair of the board of directors of Viet Rainbow of Orange County, a grassroots research, education, and advocacy organization for LGBTQ+ Vietnamese Americans and their loved ones. Welcome, James.
In my smile, my body, and my style. Don't waste your time trying to criticize, cutting me down, put away your knife sufficiently.
All right, our next guest is Dr. Yvonne Y. Kwan, who is an assistant professor of Asian American Studies and who led efforts to implement the California State University Ethnic Studies graduation requirement. I was an ethnic studies major at UC Berkeley, so great work, Yvonne. Her research explores how even though social trauma may not be verbalized or articulated, children of survivors can still develop the capacity to both identify with and experience the pain of previous generations. Welcome, Yvonne. And our third guest is Thien Le, who is a Vietnamese American poet, community engager, and public librarian from San Jose, California, my hometown. Danny has used poetry and writing as a vehicle to build upon his own redefining Southeast Asian identity and to help others reclaim their own personal narratives through the art of storytelling. Welcome, Danny. And our fourth guest, Dr. Thu Quach, an epidemiologist, has been working in public health and healthcare for nearly 25 years. She is the president at Asian Health Services, which serves 50,000 patients in English and 14 Asian languages. She also helped form Pivot, the progressive Vietnamese American organization, which is the co-sponsor for this show, and which engages and empowers Vietnamese Americans for a just and diverse America. Hello, Dr. Thu Quach. All right, welcome all of you. And we're dancing to DJ Puzzle's DJing, and it may be sort of an odd thing for a show on mental health, but I think hopefully one of the things we take away from this is that you need strength, you need happiness, you need hope to survive through mental health issues, whether those are your own or whether those are of your loved ones and your friends and your community. I just wanted to start off with asking you all, how has your mental health been during these past 20 months, 2 years, this era of the pandemic and, the so-called China virus and Kung flu and all these other kinds of things that have been having such a deep impact on us as Vietnamese Americans, Southeast Asian Americans, and Asian Americans. James, why don't you start us off? What's been going on for you?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me here. What's been going on? When you sent this question, I just stared at it for a really long time, like, what is my mental health? And one thing I do want to say as we're talking about mental health today is I think oftentimes we equate mental health with mental illness. And I think mental health is not just the negative aspects, it's also about the positive parts of our well-being. And so for me, the pandemic has had a lot of ups and downs, as I'm sure with a lot of other people. My anxiety has been heightened in several ways. Like one, I'm in grad school, trying to do a dissertation in grad school during a pandemic is difficult. But two, I'm also one of the primary caregivers in my family. And it has been super difficult to walk my parents, grandparents through all the difficult COVID services that exist out there. We think that by now that there'd be much more linguistically appropriate, accessible things, especially for people in Southern California. But it's a mess out there. And being a primary caregiver, I've really had to learn different coping mechanisms to draw boundaries between myself and my family. As much as I love them, I cannot spend every single day with them. And so I'm learning to respectfully tell my parents and grandparents, hey, I need a moment to myself. And gaining that skill has been really important throughout the pandemic. And I think it's only possible because I can actually speak Vietnamese with them. If I didn't, I don't know where the conversations would be going. But yeah, I think for me though, I think in Mariam Kaba's Hope is a Discipline article quite a bit during these times, and really trying hard to stay hopeful and optimistic despite the pandemic, despite living through extended crises wrought by racial capitalism. And I think being in community has really helped with that.
Well, I think that's absolutely right. We need the community, whether it's a in-face community or virtual community, to remind us that we're not alone, that we're not facing all these different kinds of challenges. And that's one of the reasons why we wanted to get everybody together. But those are awesome. I mean, those are, I would say, awesome points. Those are great points to remind us about, especially for me, the caregiver challenges that many people do have, that it's so isolating oftentimes to be the caregiver of other people. And also like the language issue. I mean, it's so hard to deal with so many of these challenges if you share the same language, but for so many people, especially as we'll be talking about intergenerational issues, don't share the same fluent language, and you're dealing with like medical people and medical terminology and all these kinds of things. It's so daunting for so many folks. Yvonne, what about you? What's been happening for you?
Yeah, so I think, I mean, there's so much that we can talk about. It's been a long COVID pandemic, right? But at least from my positionality as an educator, I really feel for other educators out there. I mean, I teach at a university, but my oldest sister is an assistant principal at a high school. My other sister is a counselor at a high school as well. So it's and children of all ages, including our students, are struggling. And as kind of a primary point of contact for others too, there's a lot of that kind of emotional labor that we are working through with our students to help them try to understand this unprecedented time, while we ourselves are dealing with, you know, are we online? Are we in person? What protocols do we have to take? How do I handle the Zoom? And like all these other things. So it's just has felt like this beyond just we're being worried about COVID, is that being worried about our next generation, right? And how they are also coping with this, and how we as educators can help them navigate through this process when we don't know, you know, how to navigate through this process either. And we also have administrators making decisions that, you know, may or may not know what it's like on the ground. But I had my first day of classes yesterday at San Jose State with my students. Everyone is excited to return to the classroom once we are able to, but there's high anxieties to do so, obviously because of Omicron and all of that. But I have this sense that people are yearning to be back together, obviously safely and all of that, but it's really telling of that the importance of social interactions and communities that we need to have to support for one another.
Absolutely. I grew up a few blocks from San Jose State, so fantastic that you're there and you're doing this work. And yeah, I'm an educator too, so I know exactly what you're talking about, like looking out at a sea of Black boxes instead of faces during this pandemic was so demoralizing for me personally as an educator. But of course, for the students, it must be even worse, because I used to have to teach one class, or taking 3 or 4 classes, and constantly through this digital interface. And these are the adult students we're talking about. What about the younger students? I have an 8-year-old son, had to watch him go through 1.5 years of virtual schooling. And of course, the educators at that level are also facing enormous challenges as well. So for parents, for teachers, for students, it's just been such an enormous challenge on top of everything else. And I'm sure it's producing all kinds of mental health challenges. Danny, you're also from San Jose. Glad to have you, man. What's been happening for you?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Yvonne and James, for sharing. You know, I can speak on many different levels. I mean, as a librarian, public librarian, you know, serving the community in an equitable space in the pandemic has been hard the last few years, since, you know, the misinformation or the mixed details coming out into the public view. We didn't know how we were supposed to serve while social distancing ourselves, while wearing different types of masks. And, you know, since a lot of our patrons enjoy, you know, lounging or being in the library space, not being able to have them there, and, you know, moving and pivoting our programming in a digital sphere, especially if they do not have the technology or the means to join us to be in community. That was the hardest thing, and how we were supposed to reach out to thousands of people every day. That was getting to me. On the second thought, I still help my parents at our gas station. I've been helping them for almost 30 years. And, you know, with the rise of Asian violence and my elderly parents, and worrying about what would happen due to COVID, or even having them be by themselves during the rash of break-ins, my anxiety was up. Last year, I was held up by gunpoint just because things were just so crazy. You know, I've never been held up by gunpoint. I wish nobody would ever have to go through that, but I definitely felt like it ain't gonna get better. You know, we're now in our 3rd year. I I'm definitely seeing some improvement. However, there is still a division on what society wants to do, especially in America. And I just want to move forward, but it's definitely hard when we can't all move together. So I'm keeping myself smiling still, brother. So that's all I can do.
Well, we got to smile past the pain, right? I mean, I speak as someone who also has been held up at gunpoint in San Jose. All right, so I think I sort of know. And my parents ran a small Vietnamese grocery store, so we're coming from something of the same situation. And of course, with libraries, even before the pandemic, what was obvious about public libraries is that they served a mental health function. People went there for space, for resources, just to get a place to sleep or a place to sit. And that's been shut off for so many people who don't have any other resources to draw from. So unfortunately, we live in a society in which so much has been forced onto the public library system to perform instead of other agencies who should be tasked with these kinds of things. Thu, you're a frontline professional, I think. So I can imagine that there's all these personal and professional circumstances you've been facing during this time as well.
Yeah, thanks, Viet. First, I just want to say what an honor it is to share the space with all of you. Such huge respect for all of you and your work. I work at Asian Health Services. We are a primary care providing medical, mental, and dental health. And imagine when the pandemic hit, our patients went into hiding. And it was really, really hard. We're based in Oakland, Chinatown, and Chinatown is a bustling area, and it went empty. And so we stayed open. So you imagine those of us working there, dealing with, being a working mom, a partner, and then still going in to ensure that our clinics can stay open. I think that most of us power through with adrenaline, but, thinking it's temporary, thinking that when we hit the finish line, we can all relax. And 2 years later, that finish line keeps moving. And I have to say that we're all working on fumes right now. For frontline workers, for everyone, we are exhausted and we are burnt out. And, I think the mental health piece is really showing through. It always has been hard for us, but this pandemic and the surge that keeps coming has been rough on all of us. And I'm always so proud of the staff, but it is really hard that we are not only caretakers for our family, but we're caretakers for our staff, our doctors, our nurses, our community health workers. We were the ones setting up the COVID testing, the vaccines, the contact tracing. And if we weren't around, our communities would have been completely ignored while being blamed for what was happening. So it's been a lot of pressure for all of us.
Yeah, I really can't imagine. I'm just a educator and a writer, and most of my life can take place online or in a room if it has to, but even I felt pressure during the last year. I basically stopped writing in the last 3 months of 2021 because I was just so stressed out from everything else that was taking place. So I can't imagine what it's been like for medical health professionals and the constant barrage of things that you have to deal with. But I think a lot of people who face mental health challenges and stresses feel very isolated, especially during this time of the pandemic and the digital era and everything like that. And they may feel as if they're facing their challenges alone. So I think it's actually really important for us to speak about, what we ourselves have faced and how we ourselves have tried to cope and to deal with things. So Thu, I want to start with you. How have you sought to take care of yourself and the mental health of your loved ones?
Well, if you ask my family, they say I suck at it, but it's been hard. And I think what a lot of us are learning, among our peers, among our colleagues, is really having compassion for each other, but particularly compassion for ourselves. I think giving ourselves a lot of grace that we can't be perfect, and that goal of trying to be perfect is actually really harmful to us. And so I think we're learning how to lead with a lot of self-compassion and modeling it among ourselves at work. But, I have a teenage son and another one that's 11, and they're not easy. My partner stayed at home and dealt with them, and I would run off into work so that I didn't know what to deal with them. But, I think it's finding support for each other and then making time. It's been really difficult for everyone involved. And the most I would say is giving myself and others a lot of grace.
I needed to hear that today because everybody's at home today because we've had COVID cases in the house. And so people are home. And So we're back to the era of, in my household, kids, my son, 8 years old, is in school, and then, you know, coming to me with like various kinds of questions and me getting all freaked out because I have to take care of everybody else too. And so that lesson here about compassion and acceptance and allowing ourselves, you know, to be generous with ourselves when we fail is really, really crucial. And of course, you know, Thich Nhat Hanh that just passed away a few days ago, and we have to remember the lessons of that he was trying to teach everyone. And I have a little box set of 5 of Thich Nhat Hanh's books. They're really, really tiny with his lessons on 1 page each. And when I showed my son Thich Nhat Hanh's obituary, he said, "Oh, that seems like a cool guy. Maybe we can read some stuff from Thich Nhat Hanh." I said, "Well, I have it for you." So every night we read a page or 2 pages, and they're really short, a couple hundred words of Thich Nhat Hanh. So we've been reading a book called about how to eat. It's like how to eat, and it's like really resonating with this 8-year-old boy. So there are you know, variety of resources out there for us. Okay, Danny, how have you been trying to cope with these challenges for yourself and for your loved ones?
Really, the fact that my background has always been in like youth culture. So from event planning, nightlife, you know, working with DJs, artists, working with community events and murals. It was fun. You know, you're out into the public, you're seeing arts and community come together. When the pandemic came, all of that was gone. You know, venues were closing left and right. All my friends who usually, you know, DJ'd live, they had to switch to going online on Twitch. Not the same, man. Not the same, especially if you're trying to dance and enjoy yourself. So I was starting to see things that served me in, I guess, a different life, if I want to say that now, no longer could serve me during this pandemic. And so I really had to reevaluate what was my identity. And a lot of times I was leading into what I did with others as my identity. You know, it might be an existential thing to think about, but I think in this pandemic, I really found myself and started to transform who I wanted to become, leaving behind, you know, my association and then looking into myself, because it's hard being a Vietnamese. I guess I'm the firstborn in my family and the male who did not choose the direction and lifestyle that they wanted for me. I didn't want to take their family business. I didn't want to become the grade 3 engineer, doctor, and lawyer. I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to be a creative. That did spell being poor to my parents, but I think I made out by, you know, finally confronting why I had to let go of my resentment and hate towards them, and also forgive myself for not, you know, growing into what they wanted. Then finally accepting that I'm going to be who I am and make who I am, you know, perfect for me, you know, hit that first step first and then move forward. And I think in the last 2 months, it's been a breakthrough. I went back to the gym. I started working on my book and, you know, I started my clothing line, which I put all in the back burner. You know, everything I've ever done for myself, I put in the back burner for others, I put to the forefront. And it's been kind of crazy, the amazing changes that's been happening. So yeah, loving self, forgiving self.
I just got to say on the question of your profession and what your parents think about it, if when I, as a kid and a teenager in San Jose, going to the San Jose Public Library back in the 70s and 80s, had somebody like you, a cool, hip, you know, poet, DJ, librarian who's Vietnamese American, it would have made such a huge difference in my life. You know, I might have become a librarian if I had had Danny in the San Jose Public Library at that time. But, you know, the other thing you bring up, I think that's really important is, despite all the negative, horrible stuff about the pandemic, one bright spot is that in some circumstances, it's allowed some of us to just reconsider who we are and what our lives are like and what are about, you know, reconsider our relationships, and sometimes for the better, as you say, you know, in terms of just changing ourselves and making a break that we haven't been able to make before. I mean, not under the best circumstances, but it's great that you've been able to do that. You know, like when the pandemic was about to hit, I said, I got to get some gym equipment in my house because I might be stuck here for the next year or two. So I got a treadmill, I got weights, and you can't really tell, but I feel better. So whatever it takes. All right, Yvonne, how about you? How have you tried to deal with these challenges for yourself and your loved ones?
Yeah, I think just to echo what everyone else has said is that to show each other a little bit of grace kind of in all of this. And as you say about that, you have a home gym. I mean, I don't have that expansive of a home gym, but I do work out every single day. That's been a good habit of mine that I've developed. And there's no excuse for me not to work out, because I'm like, hey, it's literally in the other room, right? Or if it's not working out at home, it's just going out on hikes and nature and all of those things, and kind of connecting with the world around us in a different way, outside of that hustle and bustle and all of that, because it was no longer available, no longer, as Danny said, like all of that gave us life no longer was in existence anymore. So kind of figuring out new ways to find hope, happiness, and joy, but also being okay with not being okay at some times, like and being okay with staying in bed, and all of that, right? But one thing I also found is as you said, Viet, is finding some community, like core community, because obviously when we were socially isolated, you can't just be all over the place, right? But really reconsidering the relationships that are important in our lives, right? And how we continue to connect with folks who we cannot physically see, but like almost you have to like choose your bubble, right? Like your core bubble, and how is it that we can take care of one another? And a lot of that has been cooking for one another, feeding, like literally nourishing one another through food, through connection, and that. So I wouldn't have been able to, I think, survive this without those core people in my life. So I mean, kind of big shout outs to them, and I think they know who they are. But yeah, so.
It's true. I've cooked much more. I recommend the air fryer to everybody. It helps, right? And I do want to say that my gym is next to my washing machine and my dryer. Okay, so it's not that fancy, but it does its purpose. But one of the other things that I did, and my wife and I did, is like we started to take walks every day. We had to, and that's something we didn't do before the pandemic. And then of course it was great to go take a walk for an hour every day. But then because it's like the anti-Asian violence thing, I had to start thinking about whether someone would drive by and say some stupid stuff to us, and so there was such a mixed bag all around. But one of the more positive things, we have Accented. This is a show that came out during the pandemic. We didn't have this before. And so to take advantage of a terrible situation and realizing that people are online, we created this show. And I think it has helped to build a virtual community and to have us do events like this that we couldn't have had before in person. All right, James, what about you? How have you been coping and with all the myriad challenges?
I echo a lot of what Yvonne just said about having a core group of people. I think what the pandemic really showed me, and I saw this funny tweet, but essentially the pandemic was all about realizing who your tier 1 friends are. Everyone who's tier 2 and tier 3 friends just had to we'll reconnect with you later. And for me, realizing the couple of grad student friends who live around me, we created a bubble and we started co-writing together at cafes outside or just on Zoom when we didn't want to leave our places. And that really made the academic process a lot less lonely. Just having that community, we're all experiencing the same thing. We're experiencing the precariousness of the academy, but also of our families being shaken up by this pandemic. And so to be able to write and just like vent with people over time has really been a huge source of soothing, I would say. And I think personally throughout the pandemic, it really forced me to pay attention to my body a lot more. I think before that, my mind ruled everything. Like if I wanted to do something, if I thought I could take on X amount of projects or whatever, I would go and do it. But the pandemic really forced me to stop and pause, or maybe that's also just me getting older. But realizing that our minds, bodies, and spirits are integrated, and allowing one to fail just doesn't do it. So I pay attention to my body a lot more now. I take more rest. If that means less publications, it just means less publications. And you know what? That's just the way it's going to be.
Well, I mean, the point about the bubbles is really important too, because we used to do this hypothetical exercise. Who would you want to be stranded on a desert island with? And now we have the real exercise. Who do you want to spend time in a social bubble with? And one of the things that's also interesting about this time period is thinking about what will we do when it's over? Okay, so we think back about the fact that we had this whole pandemic thing before in the 1918 so-called Spanish flu, which everybody pretty much forgot about because I barely even heard about it before this time period. And you realize that after the Spanish flu, which killed like millions and millions of people and is worse than what we're going through, everybody just sort of went crazy. This is why we have the Jazz Age, like we all thought it was due to World War I and surviving World War I. And it's because no one talked about the Spanish flu or that epidemic that we realized that now we realize everybody wanted to go party because they just survived this terrible flu. So I'm sort of looking forward to all the hedonism and all the decadence that we can indulge in as soon as this is declared officially over. All right, so James, what challenges, crises, issues have you seen arising in the various kinds of communities that you are a part of and that you work with that are related to mental health?
Yeah, so as a public health researcher, one of the things, a group of Vietnamese researchers, actually, we came together, Thoai Ngo, who works at the Population Center in New York City, he convened some of us at the beginning of the pandemic to do a survey on young Asian American mental health, because he was seeing that mental health was being talked about a lot during the pandemic, but so much of the data on Asian Americans was focused on adults and not really about the youth. So when we surveyed the youth, I think a lot of the findings are not surprising, I would say, due to increasing sentiments of anti-Asian sentiment. About 2/3 of our youth just said they stopped going outside. They were terrified. And they also experienced a lot more online harassment, not just in person. So even though we're shifting to a lot of things virtually, it doesn't mean that the harassment is being shifted away. It's just popping up in a new setting. And so a lot of that is obviously associated with depressive symptoms, anxiety. And so really paying attention to our youth needs is at the forefront of like my mind, and what I do as a part of VROC, Viet Rainbow Orange County, is thinking about how do we create safe spaces for queer Vietnamese youth in Orange County. And that's been a challenge. So we have a summer youth program that is typically in person, but because of COVID, it's all online. And a lot of our youth, they're high schoolers, they're living at home with their parents, and some of them they haven't invited their parents into their queer identity yet. And so some of them just stay mute on Zoom the whole time because they can't share anything verbally out of fear that their parents might overhear that they're taking part in a queer program. And so quarantining is can feel really isolating, but when you're queer as well and you can't, have that dialogue with your parents and your family yet, it's like that just exacerbates a lot of things. And so I've been seeing a lot of that in the community. And so the youth have said, even though they can't speak sometimes, they have to be muted, just having that support group of like other queer Viet folks there, queer Viet folks who are older, who've lived through other crises like the AIDS epidemic, knowing that they've survived has been really important for the youth to know that there are models of resilience and resistance. But it's really been hard. It's been hard.
That's a really interesting situation. Interesting, it's a very difficult situation that you're talking about. Also, on the one hand, like the era of Zoom presumably allows us to build virtual communities that didn't exist before. So if you felt isolated, for example, as a queer Vietnamese youth, you could have a virtual queer community that you might not have had before. But here you're saying, if these youths happen to be at home in a shared space with their parents who could understand English, they're in a very complicated situation. What's the balance between that? Do you think that it's been more negative or more positive in terms of what Zoom and other virtual platforms have allowed for example, queer Vietnamese youth during this time?
So hard to say. I think in a lot of ways, it does make things a lot more accessible. You know, you just pop open your computer and join in. And for the people who do have like a private space, it's, I think, allowed them to connect in more ways than before. But for our youth who are living in like small apartments with their parents and like uncles and aunts, like it's been really hard. But I think it's a double-edged sword, like listening in, like being able to connect with people has been nice, but not being able to speak verbally has been a challenge. But I will say, like, the chats are always popping off. Like, you know, they can still type in their contributions. And so in that way, there's still some adaptation.
So I'm sure it's obviously a huge mental health stress on queer Vietnamese youth, regardless of the circumstances they find themselves in, but aggravated, as you say, under the Zoom era. But I'm kind of curious as well. I mean, do the parents, let's say the parents don't accept this, don't accept their children becoming whoever they want to be. Do you think that's also a mental health stress on the parents as well? And what happens in that situation? I mean, are there resources for the parents in that situation?
Oh, definitely. And one of the reasons why VROC exists, and shout out to Mama Kathy and Mama Long who are in the audience, is we formed because of an intergenerational need in the Viet community. We recognize that queer liberation can't exist without liberating our parents as well. And so, you know, for the parents who aren't yet aware of their kids being out to them, VROC provides a space for people who just want to learn. Like the moms, we have a bunch of moms who come together and they all speak Viet, which is really, really helpful. And some are much farther along in their journey in accepting their kids. And so to have that space where parents can just talk to each other one-on-one or even in a group setting, that's a huge resource. But I would say it is really tough for folks to unlearn their homophobia, to unlearn queerphobia. It is a tough journey. It's its own mental health stressor. And you know, speaking for my own parents, I had them come to VROC and I had them sit in a focus group where they talked about their journey of accepting me, and there's just all tears. But I think for my mom, especially, like for her to see other parents going through that same struggle, and then to see other queer youth being okay and being happy, that was the most important thing to her. So there are spaces out there. I think someone in the chat earlier mentioned PFLAG, like parents and families of queer kids. You know, there are resources for parents, but to reach out to them, to the Viet community specifically, there are a few spaces, but I'm glad that VROC is one of them.
Frederick Tran says, yes. Frederick Tran also says, Sai, thank you for saying that. Frederick Tran says, I'm yelling yes. And Frederick Tran says, learning this in real time through the panini, which might be the pain. All right. Frederick Tran, thanks for your comments out there.
Panini is the pandemic.
Oh, the panini is the pandemic. I had no idea. All right. All right. Okay. Yvonne, what about you? What kinds of challenges, stresses, issues have you seen in the communities that you're engaged with?
Yeah, I think especially with in the elderly or older Vietnamese and Southeast Asian communities where PTSD, depression, and other mental health challenges already exist, it has been exacerbated, right, by a lot of the additional isolation, especially too as the government, I think, lockdown or as the shutdown was happening. There was a lot of mixed messages, but also messages that echoed sentiments of wartime, of, you know, these kind of top-down directives that people have to abide by. If not, then you're gonna get in trouble, find all of this stuff. So I think that was triggering a lot for our older generation in a way that maybe the younger folks couldn't understand, in the same way of like, why are our older folks being so defiant, right? Like, can't they see that this is a public health concern? But I think it's not like sometimes it's not as logical or rational as folks who don't understand what the older folks have been through, right? So I think there's that kind of like intergenerational rubbing against those things there, especially too with the vaccines. right? Some distrust in the vaccination process, but then also the difficulties in which it was in the beginning to schedule vaccination appointments, and a lot of that came through like the at least in California, the main state websites, and you have to and then there's, as we talked about, the linguistic challenges, the language barriers arose, and then how to coordinate transportation and all of that. So I think the stressors on both the older generation and the younger generation as they're trying to take care of one another, but also both just struggling and being unable to communicate that. But I don't want to just focus on the negativity of that, right? Because I've also seen within these communities of younger folks, being caretakers of their elders and being able to spend so much time with them and learn their histories, learn their stories, and just being in a space where they have to talk to one another and the silences aren't really functioning and aren't working very well anymore, right? And so it's not to glorify, but also not to just highlight all the challenges, right? So because there's such complexity within the panini, within the pandemic, but also within in our communities too. And I mean, I can talk more about this later on. There's also like the steep drop in employment amongst service sector, amongst like public serving folks, especially like nail salons and beauty shops and stuff like that, were hit so hard, which that adds that kind of economic layer too, which also is very challenging for mental health. But I'm gonna just open that up, and then we can discuss more if we want to later on.
Well, at least we're not calling the panini the banh mi. That would be just really insulting all around. Hey, I know that your scholarly work also deals with intergenerational trauma, and I wanted to at least mention that to the audience because I think it's an important concept. Because so many of us, I think, have faced this issue of what have we inherited from our grandparents and our parents and our community in general. Can you tell us a little bit about this notion of intergenerational trauma and how trauma gets transmitted?
For sure, yeah. So in terms of intergenerational trauma, there's many ways in which we can kind of understand this, but in particular within the Southeast Asian diaspora, a lot of it does stem from wartime, right? With the experience of militarism quote unquote back home in Southeast Asia, but also the relocation process. So family members who lost many family members, or those who were persecuted for their political leanings, or were put into particular types of camps and all of that. And there are these, very much resilient survivor narratives of that, and we have to recognize that. But also in that survival process, there were some coping mechanisms that were developed that I've seen in my research is that folks tend to suppress too, right? Suppress those really negative experiences, but they may never fully go away. And so in the ways in which, let's say, parents interact with their children, or how they do that kind of socialization, it can manifest in a way that and for example, in a lot of my work, I work with Cambodian American communities, is that the children may not have grown up with parents, right? So they might not know, like, what is it, how is it that we parent a child? What does love kind of look like? And then you add that component of migration, of like acculturation and Americanization and all of that, and it creates these kind of miscommunications, missed opportunities, parents still also dealing with depression, PTSD, not having the resources to kind of understand that, to work through that, and then the children also kind of internalizing these negative interactions and reproducing that, right? You can see this in different attachment styles. You can see this in different ways in which we interact when we are under conditions of duress. And also, legitimately, the research also shows that it can lead to higher rates of depression and the such within our communities. So, but again, I don't want to focus on just the negative, because also through these traumatic experiences, I've worked with so many youth who have been able to, come to better understandings of that. And this is why it's so important. This is my shameless plug for ethnic studies, to learn these histories, to learn why these things are the way they are. And I've seen the great work that have come out of the youth, out of our communities. And I'm doing an oral history collection with our Santa Clara County, I call them our AAPI OG activists, collecting their oral histories to also learn from them, right? So that we can do this in a multi-generational process where we can learn from one another through the pain, but also search for and fight for that social justice.
Well, one of the ironies of pain and trauma is that it is negative, obviously, but it's also productive if you can survive it. And I speak as a writer, much of whose work has dealt with historical trauma, warfare, refugee experience, and so on. Those experiences pretty much basically suck, but it provided great material for a novelist. So Danny, you're in the creative side of things, and let's turn the conversation in a slightly different direction here. You're invested in storytelling, in the arts, in community activism. What function can storytelling in the arts do to deal exactly with what Yvonne talked about, to turn the pain and the trauma in a different direction?
If I were to use my personal self as an example, Vietnamese American, been taught to, be silent to my elders, listen and follow directions, not to be myself, not to be emotional. I had a very harsh upbringing in terms of discipline when, I was acting out, or even when I wasn't acting out. There were times where I was very confused about how, being just a person's child can result in so much pain. That definitely led into my adulthood and my teenage years. But creativity, if you were to speak about what I do, poetry, writing, using my words, it was very helpful, because what I couldn't convey to my family and my parents, I could convey on the mic. I was very grateful for, the Black and Brown community who, did a lot of this first and built up, their own activism and their own art forms, which, I was greatly influenced in hip hop, from the late 80s to the 90s. I really wanted to be a part of that. And when I was growing up in Oklahoma, then I moved to California, Filipinos were, another Asian group that did not act like the Asians I knew growing up in Oklahoma. And I really wanted to know how that nurturing attitude of family was so different from the one I had. That pain was brought out into my work. So being able to tell my stories in poetry form, in prose, then having a peer group, which is the audience, and other poets say, you're good enough. Why don't you continue doing that? Never having to heard that from my own family, and never having anybody else do the things I did as well. It was a lonely journey. I think I'm grateful that the youth of today have so many great outlets, TikTok, YouTube, they're better producers at, content than most people who do it professionally. But it's amazing that, when I was growing up in, late 90s to 2000s, I had to do it first. I saw other poets like Bao Phi do it, and I was emulating what he did, which was travel and do poetry. Eventually I got the opportunity to do the college circuit, which was weird, getting paid and flown out to colleges to perform. But then I saw that there's a possibility for me that's outside of the general roads that my culture, my parents wanted to provide for me. So, that led me down to different creative routes, dancing, trying to DJ, things that I would never done if it wasn't about, being bold. Now I'm a librarian, so I'm here to share stories, tell people to pick up new stories. And because of the pandemic, I share just like how we do it Accented through the virtual realm. But I was able to connect with so many authors and activists through that, and expose the library to different voices. So I've been grateful to, try to be bold to, my whole life, but it wasn't easy, definitely wasn't easy.
Still not easy. I mean, we're talking about an age where people want to ban books in the United States, and it puts, teachers and libraries at the front lines of this battle for ideas, the battle for visibility, the battle for voices. I mean, the Texas list of 850 books that they want to ban, one half deals with LGBTQ stories, and 1/4 deals with like sex education. So we know where the moral panic is coming from. And the other 1/4 obviously deals with people of color, right, and race. And so we absolutely need not just librarians, but also the storytellers out there, the poets, the community organizers to put on the spaces to give voice to stories and experiences and to model these experiences and to tell people they're not alone. Absolutely crucial, both for people's sense of who they are individually, but also for their mental health. Because if you feel like you're isolated and alone and stigmatized and there's no one out for you, it's gonna be devastating. So last question before we turn to our audience. You know, you have a very important job in all of this as president of Asian Health Services. Your organization serves so many Asian Americans and Asian immigrants. I'm assuming there is resistance on the part of Asian American communities to the very discussion of mental health and all of its various connotations.
Yeah, there is. And I want to say, I love what Yvonne had to say, like, let's also look at the other side of all of this is what the pandemic did for the healthcare system was push us into telehealth. We were not ready to go. And what telehealth did was allow all of the communities to really be able to pick up the phone, for those who had digital access, be able to do video, conferencing of all ages to talk to mental health specialists. I think all the panelists really talked about the individual and the marginalized communities. So I'm going to focus a little bit on the systems that we're dealing with when it comes to mental health. We always knew that we had a shortage in mental health workforce, and particularly in bilingual and bicultural or multicultural. And it is at a horrible state right now as more people need it. We are seeing increased usage, maybe not enough because of the stigma, but there is increased use. And yet our mental health professionals are burnt out and there's not enough of them. And I want to focus also on what I call the racism within the systems of our healthcare system and in mental health, language being just one of them, but also the digital divide is going to hurt us and something that we're struggling with among our patients. We serve patients of Chinese, Vietnamese, Cambodian, Mien, all of that. And even among our population, the access to phone lines, the access to internet is really diverse, and even know how to use it. And so you put us in a pandemic where healthcare has to rely on now on telehealth, and you see that again, communities are left out. We saw it in the vaccine where people couldn't, even if they could speak the language and had kids to really help them, that if they didn't know how to access online, they were left out. And this is actually a system that we continue to play within their rules. And then part of it is, for Asian Health Services, we're known for the services we provide, but we're major advocates in overhauling a system that has never worked and now is even more horrible. And so I really hope that, as we talk about the need for mental health and the need for healing, that we look at it from an individual level, at a community healing need level, but also needing to fight a system that has continued to hurt our community. And the last thing I wanted to really share is that the anti-Asian violence has been really hard on us. I would get calls that our nurses, our doctors, our community health workers are being attacked as they go into work. These are folks who are putting their lives on the line and getting attacked, and our patients are getting attacked. And so we started what's called a community healing unit to be able to receive people who are victims or those who are not direct victims, but just feeling the stress of the pandemic in different languages. And I think we have to think beyond just our regular system of providing care, but thinking about who needs it and how do we help them. And we are now dealing not only with the care of just people in the community, but those who've been robbed, attacked, spat on, sexually harassed. And we get to the point when we spend so much time reaching out to them, and you get to the point and says, and now can I connect you to a mental health professional? And they say no. It's no, not only because of the stigma, but the re-traumatizing of that attack has been so big. So there's a lot of work for us to do overall. And I think as a healthcare, those of us in healthcare and public health, we really have to look at how to fight the system that we're providing care and really highlight the individual and the community need, but really that system, we need to put our energy towards overhauling that system.
So Asian Health Services, a very worthwhile organization that you can donate to. It's tax deductible. And on that last slide, it showed some of the various languages that Asian Health Services works in, including Burmese, Khmer, Mongolian. And that's a really helpful reminder. This is everybody here is Vietnamese, but in some ways, Vietnamese language access has gotten a little more visibility, but some of these other languages, and you mentioned Mien as well, I'd imagine there's even stiffer challenges finding support for some of our less visible Southeast Asian and Asian American communities. So I'm so thankful for the work that you do with Asian Health Services. Now we're going to take a 3-minute break while DJ Puzzle entertains us, and when we come back, we'll have questions from the audience. If you haven't put a question in the chat yet, please do so now. Thanks to all of the panelists. We'll see them in just a few minutes.
thuật sử dụng ở Mỹ đều hiệu quả trong việc ngăn ngừa tử vong, cũng như các chứng bệnh nghiêm trọng đưa đến phải nhập viện. Và điều này quan trọng hơn là bị nhiễm nhẹ. Càng nhiều người được chủng ngừa chống Covid càng tốt cho mọi người. Do đó, bất cứ loại vaccine nào cũng rất tốt cho quý vị và cho những người xung quanh quý vị. Cảm ơn quý vị nhiều.
And that was a message from our sponsor for the show tonight, for the show tonight, Pivot. And just a quick shout out to everyone that's been supporting the Viet Fact Check team, as well as for vietcovid.org. And we'll post those links in the chat for y'all to check out. I call this a series of videos that was recorded by Thien Le Dr and others, videos to send your parents just in case they don't really get it yet. So those are available on YouTube for y'all to send out to your parents who might be monolingual Vietnamese speakers. And again, just a quick plug. Next week, we have a Baluk Black virtual cooking course with Chef Thu David Phu, Top Chef Thu David Phu. And y'all can get admission to that and tickets for the very, very reasonable price of $20.22. And then after that, you can have Baluk Black for the rest of your life anytime you want because you'll know how to cook it. Another announcement that I want to make is for the Diasporic Vietnamese Artists Network. We're so excited to announce that we'll be releasing the traveling exhibit, Textures of Remembrance, Vietnamese Artists and Writers Reflect on the Vietnamese Diaspora. Will begin its tour at the Cadets Galleries in Fergus Falls, Minnesota from January 22nd to March 12th, 2022. And here you can learn a little bit more about, if you visit the link that's in the chat, you can learn a little bit more about the traveling exhibit. DVAN developed this exhibit in partnership with Exhibit Envoy to explore a date that impacts many Vietnamese Americans, April 30th, 1975, the fall/liberation of Saigon, through contemporary arts and writing. So y'all can check out the schedule here and in the link in the chat. And in April 2022, there will be an opening for the exhibit based in Oakland at Oakland Asian Cultural Center. So shout out to the Textures of Remembrance team. Really quickly, a quick reminder that you can visit pivotnetwork.org/the to take a look at all of the programs that we have ongoing throughout the Lunar New Year. And one more highlight before we bring back up our speakers. Is that Diacritics is a blog that showcases art, literature, and stories from writers, artists, and culture makers of the Vietnamese and Southeast Asian diaspora on and from all shores. We are really glad to have with us Eric Nguyen, who is the editor for Diacritics, as well as the author of Things We Lost to the Water. So I will welcome Eric to the show to tell us about our Diacritics book spotlight.
Hey everyone, this is Eric Nguyen. I'm the editor-in-chief of Diacritics. We're the blog of DVAN, like Philip just said. And for this month's recommendation, I'm recommending Sophia Terazawa's poetry collection, Winter Phoenix. And basically using this transcripts from war crime trials from the Vietnam War, Terazawa investigates trauma and how it passes down between generations. More than that, Winter Phoenix interrogates language and its misuses, asking if justice is possible if the words being used are those of the perpetrator, and if it's possible to be witnesses without being collaborators. Challenging and inventive, Terazawa's project is reminiscent of the works of Mai Der-Vang and Myung Yi Kim in its innovative use of language and form and its penetrative investigation into history and violence. Again, that book is Winter Phoenix by Sophia Terazawa.
Thanks so much for that, Eric. And with that, I have another quick plug for y'all. If you're interested in getting the book or any of the other books that we featured on Accented so far, please visit asiabookcenter.com. You can use this code DVAN10, and I think that'll give you a 10% discount because we definitely all love discounts, especially around the Lunar New Year when we're saving all of our money for leases. And with that, I'd like to welcome back up to the virtual stage our guests for the Q&A. If you haven't already dropped any of the questions that you have for our guests, please do, and also please note your name or this Frederick multiverse might shatter and might get a little bit wild in here. But for the guests, kind of the first question that I see on the Q&A and that I would want to pose to you all is, how have you been able, if you have or have not, had the conversation about mental health with the elder generations, especially your own parents, relatives, and grandparents? And how might you respond to the elders who see talking about exhaustion / mental health needs as being weak or vulnerable? I'll pass it to you, Danny, because I saw you shake your head first. Maybe you're vibing, but have you talked to the elder generation about mental health?
Who are you asking, Phil?
Oh, Danny, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. All right.
I'm like staring directly at you on the screen, but I realized that you can't stare back at me. Man, panorama issues.
Yes. The discussion of mental health, especially in the Vietnamese community, is very hard, especially if I gear it towards my family members. We don't really talk. Parents don't talk about that. I've learned to understand my own my own elders' mental health issues, and before it became an issue, it became hard to discuss because they didn't want to approach it or admit they had problems. What I've learned to do is talk to them through story, like ask them when did things happen in their lives that in comparison to how we are living today, different, especially when it comes to war trauma. For my family, there was a lot of things where there were bad business deals, drug use, people going to jail. I had a lot of times where I wouldn't see people in my own family and they'll disappear for a while. It gets to a point where how do we discuss that without shaming them? So what I learned to is just open them up to talking about it, and also being open to not being okay with what their answers might be, even silence. I'm showing that I'm making time and space for them. That's something have learned through most of my life, is that in order for them to open up, it's not me disappearing, finding my own peace of mind, but showing up and being present for them.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know if you noticed this too, but it seems to me, I mean, to everyone, right? It seems to me that my parents or aunts, uncles are more receptive to wanting to talk about their own lived experiences and to kind of dive a little bit deeper into their histories. I think maybe there's something about the pandemic that reminds them of their own mortality and their limited time on Earth, right? What about you, G2? Do you have any insights you might want to pass on to us?
So I'll give a very healthcare-based response. So we struggle with the stigma for mental health for decades. And so we do co-location. So the idea that you come in and see your doctor, and your doctor says, oh, let me bring so-and-so over just to meet you. And it's usually a mental health professional. And we started actually doing this in our dental offices too, when people are there for the dentist and they get screened for depression and anxiety. And we make it as part of, this is your well-being. You don't talk about it as mental health because that shuts them down. So it's really about thinking about health in a more comprehensive way and being very intentional in the terms that we use. The other thing that we have figured out, and we actually did this on many issues, LGBTQ, also mental health, is create a glossary of words that we don't find in native languages, Asian native languages, and figure out ways to translate it. And we've used that glossary to train our healthcare professionals to talk about these issues. And it's worked really well. And it's a glossary that we create with our staff, and we test it out with a lot of the community. So it's really finding the language and the space rather than just figure out a way to say it, is the timing and such. And so I think we're still trying to understand it. But beyond just the mental health, I think we're also trying to understand how you think about the idea of racial justice because so much of our mental health training has been in the Americanized version. So how do we add that lens in and give the tools to our mental health professionals, especially when we're dealing with anti-Asian hate, but then it's really become a divisive issues among other racial groups as well. And so there's a lot, like I said, there's a lot of work to do, but it's really creating an opportunity in every place that you can do it, whether it's at home or in the doctor's office or in the dentist's office.
Yes, definitely taking a systems approach. And I mean, also, I got my booster shot at Asian Health Services when y'all were doing an event in the park. And I, along with a lot of other multi-generational Viet, Southeast Asian, Asian American community members were able to get their booster shot that day. So the work that y'all are doing is really crucial and critical. And just to echo Viet's point, you know, if y'all ever need a place to donate to, tax deductible. But I also want to kind of play into this linguistic piece of it. And I see some questions in the chat. If we have that glossary, you wouldn't mind sharing it. But I want to pass this next question to James. Earlier you mentioned this idea of mind, body, spirit. And I think in Vietnamese, we have this word that is tâm, which is kind of similar, right? And when we talk about like sức khỏe, right, or nhớ y and sức khỏe, it's kind of almost all encompassing of health and wellness. And I've also been fortunate to hear you talk about it before at, I think, the Asian American Studies Conference. But if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit of your insight into that too, James.
Yeah, I think sức khỏe in Vietnamese, to me, like sức is strength, right? And khỏe is like well. And so strength and wellness together, like, is your body, it's not just body, it's like mind and spirit. I think oftentimes it could be interpreted as physical health, but in my research with VROC and the queer Viet folks in it, and the moms, like when we greet each other, you know, we ask like, oh, like con khỏe không, mẹ khỏe không? Like it's really a check-in, like how are you? And I think it's you in your totality. And so I really appreciate that about the language, in that it recognizes our well-being in all its different dimensions. And it doesn't follow this Cartesian split of the body and mind, which is, I think, a very Western way of thinking about health. And so, you know, I think we have a lot to learn from our culture, our language, when it comes to having a different orientation to what health is. Yeah.
And sort of on that, I mean, maybe I'll pass this one to you, Viet. I mean, is there, as someone with children, or maybe between you and Thu, is there a way that you talk about mental health with your children that you might want to share?
Well, I don't know, maybe Thu has a better answer on this one. I talk about things like war and racism and colonialism with my son. I don't know, he's 8 years old. So some parents are like, oh my God, you're talking about these kinds of issues. You know, my feeling is that children are very capable of talking about these kinds of things because they see the visible traces of this in their everyday lives. You know, my son at 8, he has a classmate, for example, in his class who declared that they were trans in the 2nd grade. And in certain parts of the country or in certain populations, the very idea that a 2nd grader is going to declare that they're trans would freak people out. But these 2nd graders, and maybe it's because of Southern California, like whatever, you know, they're like, one day their classmate has this name, the next day their classmate has that name, and they just went along with it. 95% of the class, I think like 1 or 2 students transferred out after that. So I think students are kids are very capable of dealing with complicated things, much more so than some parents are able to give them credit for. And so thankfully in my family, we haven't had to deal with explicit mental health issues within, you know, our household. But my son grew up watching his bà nội, my mom, deal with devastating mental health issues for his entire life that he was aware of, you know. And I think it gave him, and he watched her pass away. So I think it gave him this sense of life and death, and that not everybody is healthy. And sometimes that emerges, you know, in certain kinds of questions. Like he's not going to ask, what about mental health, Dad? But he says things like, you know, what happens when we die? And I think you just have to be ready to have these kinds of conversations with them, not to talk down to them. It's one of the reasons why when he says things like, oh, you know, Thich Nhat Hanh's a cool guy, I'd like to read something by him. My response is, let's go read something by him. You know, when kids say stuff like that, they want to have a conversation. And you don't have to unload serious diagnostic terms or anything like that on them, but talk to them, and you'd be amazed at how much they're capable of understanding and how much you can learn from your own children.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree that our kids teach us a lot. They're constantly our educators. And similarly, my son, who's now a teenager and barely talks to us, but when he was younger, he would tell me, oh, you know, my classmate, he's going through a mental health issue. But it's very normalized. It's almost like, hey, he had this. And you know, I think the first time it struck me like, whoa, he told you that. And he goes, yeah, it's no big deal, mom. You know, like, and really making it seem like we can accept physical health, like someone had the flu or the cold, but somehow we can't accept that someone couldn't get out of bed. And he's done that on a lot of things, you know, on gender identity and such. And so it's constantly this issue of our next generations really are so much more open-minded, and we're the ones who have been stuck on whether it's our own or our parents' way of thinking things. And I see that in the workplace when our younger staff are always checking us like, hey, you know, this is the new world. And there's a lot of hope in that and a lot of openness to it. So I'm always very impressed by what I learned from my kids and how much they check me all the time.
Yes, thank you for you both for sharing that as parents. And I think, you know, kind of in the spirit of taking a pen, I've been following his Facebook, and they've been posting like regular posts. There's one that was recently posted where he talks about after he passes that he doesn't want like a stupa to be erected or to be held in a jar, but for a plaque to say that I'm not here, and then a second one to say I'm not there. And then another to say that I have not died, right? And I think this understanding of death and sort of the interbeingness of and sort of how we live on from generation to generation, I think is articulated, which is, you know, a very stark contrast into the mortality that we've been feeling every day. You know, another wave of the pandemic, another variant, another possible lockdown, right? For Yvonne, we have a couple of questions about intergenerational trauma and these possibilities for healing for Asian immigrants. We have a question about how to tell your elder Vietnamese parents about serious mental health diagnoses and how they manifest in chronic ways. For me, I feel like I've understood intergenerational trauma, like, you know, excuse me, but it's your parents or your grandparents are fucked up by something or this traumatic event or whatever it is, and that leads to the offspring or the children being fucked up, right? So if you also wouldn't mind, and I think maybe this could also lend an ethnic studies lens and to kind of consider, you know, we're going through this mass traumatic moment now, but for Vietnamese folks, we kind of have the Vietnam War, but there's also similar ways that other communities have been able to heal from trauma, right? So.
Yeah, and it's also, I hate like the part where it's like we always focus on the fucked upness kind of it all too, right? Because like so many of our families, our communities, like they coped so well. It's not to glorify it, but they like, we're here because they lived, right? Like, so I think it's also really important to recognize that too. And also like the talking about the silences and the challenges of that. I also want to check us a little bit, like, are the young people or the younger generations, I guess I'm not the young people anymore, but like, do they owe us their stories, right? Their experiences too, right? Because like the silences are there for a reason. It's for them to also perhaps remain whole too, right? And it could be a very kind of self-serving thing of like, I need you to tell me blah, blah, blah. But just through my work is that also, I think for young folks, sometimes we don't need to know the exact story. And I don't think I mean, if we've heard stories from our families and our elders, you know that there's a lot of embellishment that happens too, right? So it's not like exact memory fact. So I think really through an ethnic studies lens too, is that we have to learn these histories. How did they come to be, right? How, not just about, you know, like Philip, you said, it's not just about the Vietnam War or anything like that, but like what came before that? What was French colonization? How did that come about? How does that relate to settler colonialism and racial capitalism? And like all of these other things that are so intimately intertwined in the experiences of our communities, right? Because we are not just our trauma, but also like really how do economic disparities, the ways in which refugees were relocated, right, and then pitted against other communities, like how do we then develop these kind of survival mechanisms? All of that is intertwined in these kind of processes of intergenerational trauma, but because it's so complicated, it's also really difficult, I think, to disentangle, because it is so complicated and whatnot, right? And I think for us, like, what are the strategies to talk to our parents, kind of our elders about this? You know, I working through the community, working with my own therapist, you know, like kind of all of these things. Sometimes is that you can say your piece, but you can't expect anyone to respond in any particular way, right? Like, and they may not be there at that moment. That moment may come later, that moment may come never, right? For them. But I think for us is to really kind of understand what is our purpose in trying to understand that, and how can we also work on ourselves through that self-healing part. And then I challenge it again, I check myself on that word healing, because if we then fixate on healing, what if we cannot be healed? Therefore, are we just failing ourselves or others, right? So I think it's to really kind of reconceptualize our understanding of what healing is too. So that's a lot there to throw out there.
Yes, word. I don't think, I mean, word and preach. I don't have too many. I mean, we're kind of running short on time, and I feel like we always run out of time. It's, you know, what's that if not running over time a little bit, right? But I kind of wanted to do a round robin of everyone and ask you all if you could share maybe one shout out or a plug that you have about anything that we've talked about so far, up to you, as well as sort of in the spirit of Thien Le Dr, right? A mindfulness practice that you have that helps you recenter. If you all wouldn't mind sharing. Maybe I'll pass this one to you first.
So it's a shout out on it's something to advertise?
Yeah, like a plug and then a mindfulness practice.
So earlier I was part of the co-founding of Pivot. Actually, Viet's brother really was the main founder, and I was part of it. We are moving to hiring an executive director, and so we are trying to fundraise. So we're going to be putting out our auction items soon. So please donate. It has been an incredible movement in and of itself. So please support us in this next phase. And then when it comes to mindfulness, you know, I wake up before everyone else does in the family, and just being able to make my coffee and paying attention to it and having the beauty of it, it's just being present for that moment. So I really enjoy whatever it is in the morning that you do to really be present and focus on yourself.
Thanks too. Yvonne, I'll pass it over to you.
All right. So I think my plug always is to please support your ethnic studies, K through 12, community college, CSUs, UCs beyond, all of that, because we definitely need the support from our community members, from our legislators and our students. And my mindfulness practice, I come back to the kind of self-care thing, is that and I recognize my privilege in that my body allows me to do this, but when I am working out really hard and I'm trying to catch my breath, and I'm like, just feel like I'm gonna pass out or something, but I catch my breath, it reminds me that, you know, things get hard, but we also can come down from that, right? But then it trains us for the next kind of part or the next challenge ahead. But you can't always be going at 188 heart, you know, beats per second all the time. So you need to slow down at some point too.
Thanks, Yvonne. James, to you.
So my plug is with VROC. If you are in Southern California or flying in for that, we're going to be marching in the That Parade in Westminster next Saturday. I'll paste a link in the chat if you want to come march with us. We're going as a bunch of fruits because we're a fruity group, but also to pay homage to the fruits that you put on the altar for that. And our theme is abundance, because even though it has been a tough time, we do believe in the abundance of our communities. Yes, that is our flyer. I'll paste the link in the chat right now if you want to come. We're usually positioned right next to the South Vietnamese veterans, which is always interesting. So if you want to come and be fun with us right next to the veterans, it's always a good time. And a mindfulness practice I have is actually, I really make it a point to read like a fantasy novel before going to sleep. That really helps to slow me down and take me into a different headspace. So thank you to all the novel writers out there, Danny, Viet, it's keeping me alive.
Thank you, James. And to the poet himself, Danny.
My shout out is always to support your local public library in a time where we need stories to be written, listened to, read, and shared. Our institution has, throughout this pandemic, served the public with internet, curbside book drop-offs, COVID testing. We've been doing so much more than I would thought a librarian should do. But also back to centering mindfulness is that why I chose this profession is to serve and out of love for community. When I remember when a patron is getting pissed off at me trying to put an ebook on their e-reader or phone, I have to remember, they're just trying to get access, and I'm here to help them with that. So my mindfulness practice is always remember what I'm doing is out of love.
Thank you, Danny. And to you, Viet, and for you to close out the program as well.
Sure. We've shouted out a whole lot of great organizations already. One last one I'll mention, especially since we're still dealing with anti-Asian violence and feelings out there, Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund. They're also a tax-deductible organization as well. Last night I was reading Thich Nhat Hanh with my 8-year-old son, and the passage we were reading is called "Waiting is Not Waiting," where he's saying that even when you're waiting in a line and you're frustrated, like, why am I waiting? Why can't I go somewhere? He says, that's the moment when you just have to stand there and just be in the moment. So that waiting is not waiting. It's you with yourself and your own experience. Now, the issue is that with my poor eyesight, I read writing is not writing, which I found very confusing as a writer. I was like, what is writing is not writing? And then the more I thought about it, I thought, hey, he's right, because when I'm writing, this is the moment for me when I actually feel fully within myself, which is why I love writing so much. I'm not thinking about anything else when I'm writing. I'm thinking about my writing. And that's what Thich Nhat Hanh is saying we should do with every moment of our lives, whatever it is that we're doing. So for all of you out there, find the thing for you where the writing is not writing, where you can be fully present for yourself. And that is just so important. Anyway, I just want to thank all of our panelists for such an incredible, engaging conversation. Like I said at the beginning, mental health can be a very challenging topic, could be a very depressing topic, and yet here we are trying to do something energetic and positive with this, sharing our stories, sharing our experiences, sharing our coping strategies, sharing what we do professionally and personally. I just really appreciate all of our panelists for sharing with us tonight, and all of you out there for sharing. I read the comments, and I was so moved and by so many of the comments that people were writing, and the experiences and the challenges that you were sharing with all of us. So good luck to all of you with your own mental health journey, and we will see you at the next Accented episode. Take us out of here, DJ Puzzle.
Ooh, child, things are gonna get easier. Ooh, child, things will get brighter. Ooh, child, things are gonna get easier. Ooh, child, things will get brighter.